Just the other day, I saw this comment from Faith Extron, a collaborator engineer working on the Mesa project. Mesa is working to update a contributor guide. Can you guess why? Did you guess AI? Now, Faith originally didn't list out the issue involved here. However, in the update to the contributor guide, there is a link to it, so we'll definitely get to this. The situation is exactly what you might think. Someone ran ChatGPT on the code and asked it for suggestions on making it more performant. They applied a bunch of changes against their local branch, tested it, and found it gave maybe a 0.5 to 1% perf boost in some titles. And that's great. That is totally fine. I don't care what tools you use to find a bottleneck. I'll happily take more FPS, no matter who found the issue or how. The issue here isn't the use of these tools. If some AI assistant helps you find things no one else has found and lets us make the drivers faster, great. But that's not exactly what happened. What happened next is that they then tried to make it the Mesa project's maintainer's job to sort through the shit ChatGPT spit out and decide what's useful and what's not, and why the changes helped and whether or not they were correct. The contributor had no idea, and more importantly, they had no desire to actually learn about the Mesa codebase or the hardware in question. They just wanted to run ChatGPT and send its suggestions towards upstream. This is not useful, this is not contributing. It's just burning maintainer time sorting through AI hallucinations. We have enough mediocre code to review from actual humans who are actually trying to learn about Mesa and help out. We don't need to add AI shit to the merge request pile. If you don't understand the patch well enough to be able to describe what it does and why it makes things faster, don't submit it. And that's the worst part about it. Because the author couldn't explain why this was improving anything, you can't just merge code that nobody understands, and the maintainers who could understand the code, they're working on their own improvements. They don't have time to look at some improvement that somebody wrote that nobody knows what it does. So now we're making it really clear. If you submit the merge request, you're responsible for the code change as if you typed it yourself. You don't get to claim ignorance, and because the AI said so, it's your responsibility to do due diligence to make sure it's correct and to accurately describe the change in the commit message. This shouldn't have to be explained. Every developer understands this. But you can still get things like this when someone's not a developer. RFC, suggestions for improving CPU overhead in radv-cmd-buffer.c. As asked to do so in 36.8.15, I want to bring forward for discussion this local GPT-5 high code audit from radv-cmd-buffer.c. While the usual AI caveats apply, I've tested these changes locally and saw a modest but reproducible improvement in Cyberpunk 2077 going from 106.8 FPS to 108.3 FPS, and Total War Troy going from 142 FPS to 144.6 FPS. Now, there's no actual data on their testing, there's no graphs, nothing like that, and that amount of change is within the margin of error. This could very well be a real improvement, but this, in and of itself, isn't a great indication of that. Now, the author admitted this is an AI-generated change, so you should not be surprised whatsoever to see this AI report style of explanation of what is being done. Now, there's a couple of problems here. Anyone who may have used GitLab before probably is immediately noticing that something is a bit off about how this code is being presented. Here we have the first comment from Timur. This Timur is going to be the nicest, most patient, most willing to deal with bullshit person you have ever seen in your entire life. I don't know how they are this much of a professional. We appreciate the effort that you try to put into this. I think the next step would be for you to actually understand what the patches do and create a branch for us that we can review. I'm happy to guide you through if you want to pursue this. So the patches themselves aren't actually individual patches. They are just the text being dumped into the issue. This is just not how you contribute to the Mesa project. So the first step would be to take all of those changes and write a patch for each of them individually. Please also remove spurious changes, as they can cause unnecessary churn, making it difficult to review. So if any of the changes being made by this AI aren't actually doing anything, get rid of them, because you don't need them to be there. And change 1 appears to do basically nothing except for probably make things a little bit slower. The explanation for change 2 is basically just nonsense and is not a correct change at all. Change 3 is explaining something else being done in a different location in the codebase. Change 4 appears to probably make things a little bit slower, and change 5 doesn't actually mean anything in this context. Let me say again that I appreciate the effort that you put into this. I don't mind what tools you use to produce patches, however, no tool substitutes an actual understanding of the work you are doing. Whatever tools you may use for writing patches, our expectation for contributions is the same, that the contributor understands what they're doing and are able to explain and reason about it. We aren't going to merge code that nobody understands. We also aren't going to try to make heads or tails of nonsensical things if the person who submitted it doesn't even understand it. So, the person who submitted this code sort of has a misunderstanding of what the code review process is. It's not supposed to be for people to help you understand what the code is doing. You're supposed to understand the code already. Code review is to verify that the change is actually a legitimate change. It is to verify correctness, and a crucial part of verifying correctness is understanding what the code is doing and why it's supposed to be doing that, and that is something that is supposed to be provided to the people doing review, not them starting from scratch. Many of the things that these proposed changes claim to do are either already there in RADV or do the opposite of what they claim. As a programmer, it is your responsibility to make sure your contribution is sane, regardless of the tools you use. I was going to comment on this without AI hate, but I can't help but notice this isn't the first time you are showing us code like this, with explanations that are vague, nonsensical, or very difficult to follow. My suggestion is to slow down and stop to think about what the AI is doing, and maybe check what is already there in the code and understand. As I said, Tamur here is the nicest, most patient person I've ever seen dealing with AI contributions. This person just wants the code base to be better and is willing to take the time to explain how to contribute to the project. I have nothing to complain about with what is being said here. And back to our original contributor. I fully appreciate your time and effort on looking at these changes in all seriousness. Tamur, the code compiles, works at least locally on my setup. I saw measurable improvements, again, they were within the margin of error. I cannot say anything about the merits of each change myself. That is the problem. I fully understand that this is a real concern. That is why I've brought these up as an RFC discussion and not as a merge request. The idea was the developers can identify what makes sense and pick the change they like. That should be you. You should be the developer. An RFC is a discussion about the correctness of the code, whether or not these fit within the code base, not the developers trying to work out what the code is doing because you can't explain it. Maybe the time has come when Mesa needs a formal AI policy which should state some minimum requirements which contributors need to pass for bringing up such ideas and patches in general. Yes, I agree, but it shouldn't need to be explained that if you're contributing code, you need to understand the code you're contributing. Like, that's never needed to be explained throughout the entire history of development until maybe 6 months to a year ago. I also want to stress the point that I wouldn't have brought this proposal to your attention if I weren't seeing any real benefits, even though I cannot really comprehend, and don't claim to, the specific code changes or the AI reasoning. Even though it doesn't guarantee sane results, I also want to stress the point that I'm not just throwing some AI code and analysis over the fence here, but that careful prompting, AI review, and local testing already took quite some effort on my side. You should add into that understanding what the code is doing, and then if any of the proposed changes don't actually do anything or maybe make things worse, remove those things. Development. From Mike Blumenkrantz. As Tamur politely implied, it is not our job as developers to pick the change we like. It is your job as someone proposing changes to propose effective changes. It costs us valuable time to review proposed changes. It is not AI hate to point out that someone who is not capable of evaluating AI proposed changes, i.e., you, can easily overwhelm those of us who review such changes. You claim you've done careful prompting, AI review, and local testing, but I would speculate it took Tamur far longer to evaluate and review the changes here. In short, we are not going to do any testing or benchmarking here or in any other case of AI proposed changes. That is your job, in the same way that someone who is not using AI is also expected to understand and test their proposed changes. Using AI does not grant you additional privileges or reduce our expectations. All that is being said here is if you are going to use these AI tools, you need to have the same level of understanding as if you had wrote the code yourself. A completely reasonable expectation. And going back to Tamur, now I'll be 100% honest with you here. From my perspective, I see that you're enthusiastic about Mesa, care enough to closely watch our work, and you benchmark things and try to contribute, and engage with us politely. I appreciate all that, and I believe you are well-intentioned. In my opinion, please put in a little more work and actually try to understand what the code in these proposed changes are doing. The fact that you already got as far as you did shows that you are capable and you can learn this stuff. Many of us in this community, myself included, started with just as little understanding as you. And yes, this person is being respectful, but I don't think he understands what the problem is. I totally get it that developers do not want to get swamped with half-baked ideas from someone who doesn't even comprehend what he is doing, even though it might yield semi-intelligent results. As a reminder, I've brought numbers to the table of real improvement on real hardware in 2 games, the numbers are in the top post. To not leave any room for misunderstandings, the whole RFC was phrased in a way that there are no obligations or expectations involved from my side. That is kind of the problem, especially no obligation for a timed review or testing. Do not leave your valuable work for a comment over here. It was a request for comments, not a MR for code review, when my understanding that there is a distinction between the two forms holds true. I think he's trying to say that a request for comments and a merge review are 2 different things. If you do not want to spend any time on this, this is totally fine with me. In this case, other users are free to test it out themselves if they like it. And Tamur again responds, there are no obligations. If you want to contribute, it is expected that you follow up and work with us to shape the proposed changes into a form that can be accepted upstream. This is what all of us do when we submit a merge request and go through a review. This is what we expect from anyone else who wants to submit patches. I think you're taking away the wrong conclusion from this. I'd really like you to try and at least figure out which of the changes here contain the performance improvements and would like to see you submit a patch from that. And eventually there was a V2 version of the patch set again, basically handled the exact same way. At least this time, they are set up as patches, not as an individual, proper merge request, but at least they were set up as patches this time. So that's some level of improvement. Again, it's all still AI generated, and again, the author still doesn't understand what the AI is actually doing here. Tamur explained again, this isn't helpful and isn't what we asked for. We cannot use this as is, like we already said. Just repeating in case you didn't read what I wrote previously, please test each patch individually to see which one gives you the perf improvement, then we can go from there. Thank you. And from Mike Blumenkrantz, maybe some clarification. By testing each individual change, it was intended that you would benchmark the performance of each patch independently and determine which yields a performance increase that is actually perceptible. This isn't helpful because you don't understand what's being proposed, and so we are effectively playing telephone with your chat GPT, which also doesn't understand what's being proposed. AI is probably not going to notice the subtle social conflict occurring here, so I'll handle that more explicitly. We don't want to talk to your chat GPT. We want to talk to a person who is able to understand and respond to our comments. We are willing to work with you in that capacity. It takes more time to evaluate a nonsensical patch created by AI than a normal patch created by a person because AI can invent new ways to be wrong. And this one here reveals the maybe not true intent, but true level of investment the original author has with working with the Mesa project. Thanks for the efforts put into this proposal. This is a great learning experience. I also appreciate explicit but honest comments and requirements which weren't as explicitly stated before this RFC anywhere publicly, to my knowledge. Please also understand that I don't want to commit a lot of time and effort for doing the requested work only to get knacked in the ends on the grounds that I do not understand any of these changes myself. That is something that you should be knacked for not understanding the changes. After all, the LLM does all the programming work for me. In that sense, all these proposed code changes is talk from the LLM. I never claimed to possess the abilities to comprehend any of the programming work myself. That is the entire problem here. I only prompt, compile, and test the outcome, which at least sometimes gave me measurable benefits locally. As I see it, such a stance effectively excludes Mesa code contributions from non-programmers. Yes. Yes. If you are not a programmer, you cannot submit code to Mesa. I think that's a reasonable stance to have for any project out there. If you cannot write code and you cannot understand code, you cannot code. Now, this is what I mean by Tamur being far too nice. No, we don't exclude anyone. In fact, we told you how to proceed. You just chose not to collaborate with us. You don't even have to say this to him. Say, yes, we exclude people who don't understand the code they're submitting. That's okay to say in this context. You don't need to be this nice. I respectfully disagree. Under the given requirements, it is a de facto exclusion of non-programmers. We don't want to talk to your ChatGPT. We want to talk to a person who is able to understand and respond to our comments. This was stated as a hard requirement that I cannot meet. And as my time is also limited, I came to the conclusion to better put it into the tinkering of my personal needs, not the upstreaming process. I'd love to share more of my downstream work with all of you, and don't mind getting yelled at for blindly implementing unbelievably broken things recommended by AI. But it turned out that this process is far more involved and in need of more qualifications that I do not possess, and the reception so far was mixed at best. Thus, this decision saves both sides some headaches, and ASI, which is artificial superintelligence, will unlock it eventually anyway. The only qualification you need in this context is to understand the code you are submitting. That is a requirement and should be a requirement for every single project out there, I guess except your own personal ones. There is absolutely nothing unreasonable about this. This is a totally normal expectation and is the expectation given to every single contributor to Mesa. And not just Mesa, basically every single other project out there. Now, this discussion led to a follow-up document in this pull request over here. Add more details about the contribution process. A document that frankly shouldn't need to exist. This is not banning AI contributions. It's not really an AI policy. It's literally just explaining the basics of contributing code. Familiarize yourself with Git. Understand the code you write, at least well enough to be able to explain why your changes are beneficial to the project. It's up to you what tools you use to write the code, development environment, coding assistant, etc. But keep in mind that no tool can substitute actual understanding. If you want help or guidance, feel free to ask for it. The submitter is responsible for the code changes regardless of where that code change came from, whether they wrote it themselves, used an AI, or other tool, or got it from someone else. That responsibility includes making sure the code change can be submitted under the MIT license that Mesa uses. The submitter needs to understand what code they are changing, what the change does, and justify that change in the commit messages. Using coding assistants or AI or other tools does not grant additional privileges or reduce our expectations. And if you don't know programming and don't want to learn, there are other ways to get involved. Bug testing, benchmarking, things like that. You don't just have to be a programmer in this project. And relevant to the specific structure of how the code was being submitted here, please do not submit your patches in email to a mailing list. We only review patches on GitLab. Please do not paste your patches as comments in a conversation unless it is small or unless that is what the maintainers requested. If you're not familiar with how to use Git, please learn that before making a contribution to Mesa. Absolutely none of this is unreasonable. In fact, I would argue it's overly reasonable. I would argue that you probably shouldn't even want to deal with contributions like this in the first place. There may be some proper AI policy sometime down the line. That's still on the table, but that's not what this is. This is basically the equivalent of the liquid in this coffee cup is hot when you ordered a black coffee. This is explaining the basics of the basics of how to contribute to a project. On a related side tangent, here is a comment from Daniel Stenberg, the creator of curl, and shamer of many garbage AI security reports. Joshua Rogers sent us a massive list of potential issues in curl that he found using a set of AI-assisted tools. Code analyzer style nits all over, mostly smaller bugs, but still bugs, and there could be one or two actual security flaws in there. Actually truly awesome findings. I have already landed 22 bug fixes thanks to this, and I have over twice that amount of issues left to go through. Wade through perhaps. And if you're curious about seeing the report itself, here is a blog post on the matter. This is what happens when somebody who is actually knowledgeable about a field goes and uses these tools to speed up their work rather than someone who doesn't know anything about the field trying to replace that knowledge with the tool. But what do you think? Especially so if you're a maintainer on some form of project out there. How do you handle contributions from people who submit AI code? Do you accept AI code? Do you think they should fully understand it? Do you care? Do you understand the code you submit? I'd love to know. So if you like the video, go like the video. If you really like the video, go subscribe. And if you really, really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Daily Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and what if I'm AI?
Money that I don't accept.